So we have actually a whole host of stories, in part because Salesforce led with a bunch of news. And they announced two things, and I don't know if you were at the announcement or not, but two things that they introduced. One is what they're calling 2dx, because 2.0, apparently, maybe they explained why they decided to call it 2dx instead of 2.0, but basically their new release of Agentforce. And with that, they also released what they're calling the AgentExchange, which is a marketplace basically for agents. But I do think they have an interesting twist on it that is going to be interesting. So were you there? And if you want to tee it up for us, if you were.
Yes, I was. So the idea of Agentforce 2dx, this is basically a 2.5 launch, but it was very much focused on the developers, and it's at the Trailblazer conference, thus kind of a developer experience, developer edition type D based branding. And I thought it was interesting because they've announced a few things that you would expect from a developer perspective, such as better defined API, which is not super exciting, but definitely table stakes. There's better testing abilities for agents. There's better visibility for basic for things that have been invoked, as well as for interaction and interaction explorer, which is a little step towards visibility and ongoing kind of understanding the performance of the agent. So there's a lot of these little bits and pieces that are here about inspecting and exploring the performance of the agent as well. And that's really what I thought the meat of the Agentforce announcement was this time around.
I do think it's interesting. I mean, it clearly doubles down and I think solidifies what I've been talking about for a while. And that is that Agentforce is really a build your platform, and that is clearly the direction they're going. And, I think Salesforce for a while has been sort of having a foot in both camps. Clearly, their roots with the CRM was definitely not that sort of developer focus, although they had uh, Remedy Force, right, which was sort of a developer platform on top of it.
Mhm.
Um, but then they have things like MuleSoft, which clearly gets us much closer to the developer ecosystem. So, no surprises in my mind. I think all the right sort of things that they need to be doing in order to go down that road, if that's the bet they're making on this whole developer platform. And I think that's also related to the agent exchange, in that it's really about this idea of how do they then start taking this developer centric viewpoint and extrapolate it with their partner community and their ecosystem, so that there's effectively this marketplace of building blocks to work from. So, I think it's interesting. I think I don't particularly find a marketplace all that shocking or innovative, but it's sort of a necessary thing. And I do think they're showing a lot of good partners with that. And I think that's interesting from the standpoint of, is this going to hit this sort of middle ground where they can sort of strike this balance. So I think overall it's a solid announcement. They're clearly moving at a breakneck pace, which is impressive for an organization of this size. I do think it's also interesting in light of what we talked about last week, with the fact that clearly this doesn't seem to be having a tremendous amount of impact on their financial results presently. Um, so it is kind of curious to see how this all sort of comes together, and if I mean, these are massive investments they're making if they're going to actually play out.
Yes, and I think these are actually kind of related challenges. That this version of Agentforce was very much focused on, I would say, IT and developer centric desires, administrative needs, and that's needed because if you want to get to 100 agents or 1,000 agents, you need some sort of uh, control plane to be able to manage all of this and to deal with observability issues and performance issues and testing issues. And I think that's one of the reasons that Salesforce is going in this direction. They realize that if they really do want this to be a $1 billion business, there needs to be the IT and scaling tools to make agents work. And frankly, Salesforce doesn't have them, and they're not really that common in the marketplace as a whole. There's no real third party that is, say, like Informatica for data integration or Tableau for BI or something like that, a third party that can take care of all this stuff. So Salesforce is building their own suite, as are some other big players, and it's really interesting to watch because for me because I feel like one of the big picture things that's happening is that this new set of IT tooling is being built by the platform players for a change. Because I cover a lot of other IT management spaces where there's these separate tools that manage IT or manage IT observability or management. And in this case, Salesforce itself is just saying, we're just going to build it from the get-go.
Well, it is interesting. I think it's a risk for Salesforce. They don't have a great track record in this space in terms of selling. I mean, they obviously sell to a CIO, but in terms of selling at this level, and so that'll be the curious thing. And then, I think you're right. It's also we're gonna close the show today talking about why this is a significant concern for CIOs in general. But it also, I think, is indicative of the fact that we're really seeing like these three major competitors emerge in this space, sort of duking it out. Literally, I can almost envision, like, I don't know if there's such a thing where three fighters are in a ring all together, but where these three fighters and they're just literally just standing still. They're not bobbing and weaving. They're just sitting and pounding on each other. And one of those is, of course, Microsoft, but the other is ServiceNow. And ServiceNow, I think this is interesting from a couple of standpoints. When they introduced their Agentic AI platform a couple of weeks ago, it was very clear they were trying to go after this control plane that you're talking about, right? And I don't know that they sold me on it from the perspective of how they positioned it, but clearly that's where they were going.